All right. Christina, does it look good on your end?
Yeah,
Okay, cool. All right. Is everybody able to share my screen or see my screen?
I see it.
Okay, cool. So a little bit about our housekeeping, which is the usual things we go through. As I mentioned before, we're going to be talking briefly about officer elections, which are going to be coming up at the end of the semester. And then we're going to have Dr. Olaguez talk about the forensic psychology program and her experience through graduate school, and a little bit of a Q&A at the end if we have time. So as always, Psychi membership is for life. You apply once. If you get approved, you will be able to enjoy all of the benefits forever. The membership right now is a one-time fee of $75. So if you pay that, you will be able to access your account and get your login information, which will give you this whole world of opportunities with specific scholarships, grants, awards, and CE credit opportunities and such from different professional organizations through different chapters and stuff like that. When you log in, you can manage also subscriptions, which will be special Psychi offers and all of that. And those change regularly, so there's not any specific ones, but if you do go through the login process, you will see that there's always new things for people to explore. And of course, you can add Psychi on your CV or curriculum vitae or even resume, and that would look pretty sick on there, I would say so myself. Our membership requirements right now, and I believe as they've been for a long time, is if you're an undergraduate, you would have to be majoring or minoring in psychology. You would have had to complete it at least 3 semesters or equivalent of full-time college coursework, and you would have had to complete it at least 9-semester credit units or equivalent of psychology courses. And you could be a second semester sophomore with a GPA that puts you in the top 35%. For the specific requirements, once you fill out the application, they will let you know if you do meet the requirements, and if not, for each case, why you didn't meet the requirements. So if you were interested in that, you could also find out more by just sending in your application for a review. So once you get confirmed, you will be able to go ahead and receive your login information. You'll be able to make your payments. I'm actually currently the treasurer right now, and my email is provided right there. We take payments online through Zelle, Venmo. We even take cash if that's what you would prefer, but we would have to schedule it for pickups. And you also get a certificate, which is pretty cool. And that would also be able to get picked up later on in the process. And then you get to enjoy your benefits. And we provided a little QR code for you guys right there to make it easier. And there's a link for the application as well, where it says number 2. So you'd be able to just easily click and go from there. So if you're interested in becoming a Psychi officer, so every semester we have these elections where we select new officers if needed, and there's a voting process that goes into it. So if you're interested, you will be able to send in a little bit of a bio or why you're interested in wanting to become an officer. And then on the day of the elections, which will be, I believe, set a little bit later, so that'll go out through our Instagram or other social media, email and stuff like that. And on that day, you'll be able to present why you're interested in this position. And then the members and the officers will get to have a voting session, and the person with the most votes will get to become an officer. So this is really cool because you get to not only gain this sort of experience, but also become more impactful on the community and help others in their journey of going through their education process. If you're interested in learning more about the elections, you can email our president, Christina, and her email is provided right there, or you can, well, actually, it's better to email them both. So probably email Christina and CC Daniela, who's our vice president. And then that way it'll officially be in the process. So if you ever miss a Psychi meeting, we do provide our PowerPoints as well as our Zoom recordings. It's going to be on Microsoft Teams. You guys should be able to access that through your Cal State email using this code on Teams. Like when you go on there, you add a new team or join a new team, and you would use the code that we provided right here. And that way, under files, you would be able to watch any of the videos that you missed. So you never have to miss anything. And you can also stay connected with us on Instagram, which is just Saikai CSULA. We post quite a bit of good stuff on there, a lot of resources. So I would definitely recommend that one. All right, I'm going to pass it to Andrea to talk a little bit about scholarships and grants. Oh,
Hi,
sorry.
everyone. So I found these scholarships. They're from the Hispanic Association of Colleges and Universities. And Cal State LA qualifies as a Hispanic serving institution, and you can make an account, and there's like various scholarships there, and some require an essay and some don't. But I'll put the link in the chat. And then as for the other one, the undergraduate research grant, this is from Saikai. So I was looking into this. The most recent deadline would be May 1st, but that's too soon now. But you know, if you get close to a faculty member and you want to do research, you can ask them. And October 15th would be the deadline. All you have to do is be a Saikai member and be enrolled as an undergraduate student, or not be more than 6 months past graduation from an undergraduate program. And you get a $1,500 award to do research, and you have to submit a proposal and all that. And I can put the link in the chat as well.
All right, thank you so much, Andrea, for those very helpful resources. You guys, as always, can reach out to any of us if you had any questions about anything on the presentation today or about Saikai in general. We would love to be of help. So now I'm going to pass it over finally to Dr. Olaguez, who is our presenter today. Let me go ahead and stop sharing my screen. Okay.
All right, thank you for inviting me to speak today. Let me get this set up. Also want to shout out to Saikai, because while I was in grad school, I did apply for a graduate research grant. So I was funded, I think it was $1,000 from Saikai to be able to conduct research. So I remembered I was a lifetime member, and that was a really nice opportunity to get some funding from Saikai. So thank you for inviting me to speak. Do you see my screen okay? Everything sounds good?
Yes.
Awesome. All right, so I think it would be nice to have you submit questions throughout the presentation. I have a couple of different topics that I want to cover, but I think if you submit questions as we go, I'll try to address them. And then maybe at the end, we can have some time to have a general discussion about some things that I've covered, but I want to make sure that I answer those questions as we go along. So my name is Dr. Olaguez. It's similar to the way that you pronounce Rodriguez, but it's Olaguez. If you still have trouble with that, you can always call me Dr. O. I'm really excited to be joining the faculty at Cal State LA. This is my first year as a full-time faculty, and I want to give you a little bit of an overview of what I hope to cover today. So I'm going to start with a short summary of my academic journey so that you can kind of see where I've been and how my journey has influenced the perspectives and information that I'm going to share with you today. I'll briefly talk about what forensic psych is and what type of careers you might want to pursue in forensic psych. I know that it's something that you are likely interested in, but I can give you an idea of what are the possible career options and possible career paths, because it's not something that you typically see or hear about. It's a little bit of a specialty within the general field of psychology, right? And then I'll talk about specifically the forensic psych masters that we have at Cal State LA. Generally what it is, an overview of the program, what you might expect, and then some tips if you're interested in applying. All right, so a brief background of where I've been. I typically see folks talk about their academic journey, taking them across the country, sometimes even across the world. And lucky for me, my journey has taken me all across Southern California. So I've been really lucky to be able to stay local, and that was a primary focus for me, that I wanted to stay local. But I always preface that if you do want to stay local, you have to find ways to be more competitive and stand out, because Southern California is a very popular place and a lot of folks want to come to SoCal. So it is possible, but keep in mind that you still are competing against everyone else that wants to come here. And we're really lucky in that we have a lot of universities that are within a short distance from one another, right? So my journey, so I grew up in South Central, not too far from Cal State LA. And I started out as a transfer student. So I originally attended Cerritos College, and then I transferred to Cal State LA. So you may not know that I also completed my undergrad and my master's at Cal State LA. So I know Cal State LA very intimately as a student and now as a professor. So when I transferred, I didn't join a research lab until my senior year. So throughout my undergrad, I was working pretty much full time. So it took me a little bit longer to transfer. It took me a little bit longer to finish. And it wasn't until my senior year that I started learning about graduate programs and what I, had to do to apply to a graduate program. And that's when I found out all of these different requirements and expectations that I should have been working on in the past, but didn't have time for. But I joined a research lab in my senior year, and I cut my hours to be able to allow more time and flexibility to get involved into these activities and to do more research on what it's going to take to get me into a grad program. So once I started digging a little bit more, I attended a couple of things and applied for a couple of things based on what I thought was going to be helpful. So one of the things that was really beneficial for me was attending the California Diversity Forum. So this is something that you're invited to if you have a good GPA. They hold it every year. And it's basically info about applying to grad school. And they usually have recruiters from different universities that come and talk to you about their grad program. And that's where I started learning about, what the different options are, and getting a sneak peek into what a competitive application may look like. That's where I learned about something called summer programs, which is where you conduct research at a different university for the summer. And then I also learned about, not through the California Diversity Forum, but I learned about the MORE programs, which are here at Cal State LA, which fund underrepresented students that are conducting research. So I applied for a bunch of things. And then I was invited to participate in the summer program at UCI. So the summer after I completed my bachelor's at Cal State LA, I went to UCI. I quit my job that I had been working for 4 years at the time, and kind of took a leap of faith. And I lived on campus for 8 weeks and conducted research and completely fell in love with the campus. And that became my priority when I came back to Cal State LA to do the master's program in forensic psych, the program that I'll be talking to you about today. So I also was really fortunate that I was awarded a fellowship for 2 years, which means that I was fully funded for 2 years. So my tuition was paid for and I was receiving a stipend. So I didn't have to go and find another job. And it allowed me to focus my entire time and energy on research, and then continue to learn about what are the ways that I can improve my application to apply to PhD programs. So when I was here, I was thinking about the next step, which was going back to UCI as a PhD student. And through these opportunities, I started learning about what are the things that I should be working on that can make my application more competitive, right? So I started taking a lead role in research projects so that I could show my independence and skills as a rising scholar. I presented at conferences, as many as I could. I started working on publications, starting to collaborate on publications as much as I could, and then refining my statement. So the statement piece is a really critical piece when you're applying to grad school, and making sure that you have a compelling story, a compelling narrative that can encourage your committee or whoever is reviewing your application to invite you to an interview because they want to learn more about you. So luckily, I did get invited to join the PhD program at UCI. So I was really thrilled about, again, being able to stay local, but also I really enjoyed the program and I thought it was a perfect fit for me because they do have a couple of researchers that conduct psych and law research, which is very few and far in between across the country. So when I was at UCI, I participated in a lot of the programs that kind of helped me grow as a student, but now I was a little bit more on the other end of things where I was helping students apply to PhD programs and mentoring students throughout the PhD process. So through these programs, I was able to review a lot of applications, which helps me get a better insight into successful applications versus not successful applications. And I can kind of see the differences in students that do end up getting accepted down the line. I've also participated in a couple of different panels based on my experiences and different workshops that, you know, I can give advice on what makes a successful personal history statement and things like that. But overall, really supporting underrepresented students, supporting diverse students, and supporting students that may not be familiar with the intricacies of applying to grad school. You know, I was also the first in my family to go to college and, you know, even think about applying to a PhD. So it's really important for me to support students that are following in that path, in any way that I can do that is something that I'm really passionate about. So while I was at UCI, I also was able to participate in a program at Cal State Long Beach because I was really passionate about trying to come back to a state institution with a diverse population. So I spent some time at Cal State Long Beach, and then I also got my first job out of grad school where I taught at Chapman University. So that gave me experience in a private university setting. So I've been able to kind of see the different types of universities, which are like Cal State systems, you know, community college, a large institution like UCI, and then a smaller private institution like Chapman. And then now I'm back. So I am super thrilled to be back at my home institution. You know, it does feel like I am back home. I'm now the director of the Legal Attitudes Lab, where I can, you know, start my own research projects and have my own mentees and, you know, start my own line of research. So that's really exciting. And I'm happy to be back and share my experiences with you all. Now I'm going to start transitioning into like the broader field of psych and law. If you think forensic psych sounds interesting, right? Like, what does it mean to study forensic psychology? What does it mean to pursue a career in this specific subfield? Because it is really specific. It is like a little niche within psychology. So sometimes you might see it called legal psychology or psychology and law. I typically use psych law or psychology and law to describe what I do. I think forensic psychology is a little bit more specific to the clinical aspect of things. And some people just have a different idea when they hear forensics versus psychology and law. So psychology and law is just the intersection of the field of human behavior or the study of human behavior within the legal system. So anytime those two things interact, which is a lot of the time because people, you know, fill the legal system and the legal system is not full of individuals that have no emotions or cognitions or experiences themselves, you'll find that the human component of it can impact a lot of the different aspects of the legal system. Some potential careers that you might want to pursue within this field are very, very broad and very diverse in their approach, and very unique, which sometimes make it difficult for folks to find a specific position. So the position that you typically see or you might think of are research positions, in which it is a generally young field when we're looking at psych and law as a whole. It basically started in, early to mid 80s, which isn't a ton of time, but there's still a lot of things to examine and understand how we can better, all of these different areas like eyewitness testimony, jury decision making. So there's still a lot to be done. So conducting research within psych and law is still a very novel and exciting field. You might pursue a position as a university professor like me, where we conduct research in university settings and, have research labs and teach classes and things like that on the topic. You may pursue a research position at a government agency, which is a little bit more, which is going to be more research focused and usually a little bit broader in their approach. So if you are a researcher in a government agency, you might be researching policy-oriented decisions, or making policy-oriented decisions in which you're trying to assess which programs work, which programs aren't working, what are the different programs that we might want to develop or fund, or see how successful they can be for specific types of populations. So really broad. You might be interested in a forensic psychology position, or you might want to be a psychologist that works within different types of legal settings. So for example, you might go into prisons and work with incarcerated folks that, either need to be evaluated for a parole decision coming up, or whether you're trying to help them cope, or whether you're offering your services in general, right, to just help the well-being of people that are incarcerated. You may conduct court evaluations. So I have an image here of a recent forensic psychologist that brought attention to the field, which served in the Amber Heard case. So you might be asked by the court to conduct an evaluation based on a certain case that's in front of you. And your goal is to evaluate the person and seek information and provide your expert testimony to the court about your opinion of what you think is happening. It's not to make a decision or recommendation about what should happen, but it's like an expert opinion of what you think their psychological state, is currently. These also incorporate like competency evaluation. So people who are charged with a crime and may not be ready to stand trial. You might do that.
In progress.
Also evaluate risk assessment. Awesome. All right, so you might also conduct risk assessments to see which folks should be released based on their current mental state, or evaluating the type of crime that they committed and how they feel about that, and present that to a judge so that they can make a decision. Working within the police department setting, again, seeing what works or making recommendations about what type of interventions might be helpful. Working with juvenile defendants, a special type of population that is currently developing, still cognitively developing, but may come into contact with the legal system at a young age. Jury consultant, you're helping attorneys develop a case and present a case, and then you can help in this capacity in a couple of different ways, either by encouraging attorneys to select or not select certain type of jurors to serve on your case, or helping them frame the story in the best or most convincing way to try to reach an outcome that you hope. So I have a question. When did you decide what career path you wanted to go? So this is a good question. So I knew I was interested in psychology at a pretty young age. And I was originally set out to be a forensic psychologist. I wanted to go into prisons and be a correctional psychologist, but through volunteer opportunities that I participated in, I recognized that this wasn't something that I wanted to do on a day-to-day basis. And then I also felt like it was going to be too difficult for me to leave work at work. And I found trouble not carrying those things home. So I felt like it was going to be a little bit of a hard job for me. And I started looking into other possible career options. And that's around the same time that I started conducting research, and I really like the research aspect of it. And that's kind of what grabbed me. Okay, so working as a victim advocate. So this is pretty broad as well, where you might work in nonprofit organizations. You might use research to help inform, again, policy or recommendations or things like that. And then finally, the FBI approach, which is a very unique and honestly a little bit hard to get to based on what I've seen so far. Because I have seen a couple of people that have pursued that route. And I wish I knew more. I know that some folks attended a very cool info session yesterday, so I'll defer to them, but that's definitely a career option that is available. Tips for looking for research opportunities in this field. So if you're looking for research opportunity in this field, in this setting, obviously I would refer you to the labs that we have on campus, but you can also volunteer in labs at different universities. So the unique component about forensic psych or psych and law is that not a lot of folks do this type of research. And then something I will say is that it doesn't have to be like a forensic psych program when you're looking for these type of research opportunities. For example, I live under the psychology department at Cal State LA, but I do have a focus in psych and law research. So when you're Googling stuff, researching stuff, that's something to keep in mind, that the department or the program doesn't have to say forensic psych in order for them to be conducting forensic psych research. Okay. All right, so I'm going to talk more about what the program at Cal State LA looks like, what you might expect to see. I will highlight all of these points and talk about them individually so that you can get an understanding of what do I mean when I say students conduct research. So this is a 2-year research-based program. Most folks take the 2 years to complete it. And the focus of the program is that you're conducting research while you're taking classes. And I'll talk a little bit about what the difference between a research-based program and a licensing program is in a couple of slides. But just to highlight the things that we focus on is we're focusing on folks who want to conduct research on psychology and law related topics. You're also going to concurrently be taking psychology related classes, primarily psychology related classes with some classes that are specifically psych law focused. And there is a year-long practicum, which is unique to the MS program. And I'll talk about that a little bit more about what that might look like. And then generally, I think it's good to consider that this program is generally designed for folks who are interested in pursuing a PhD. Because it is a research-based program, a PhD requires a lot of research experience, and typically students take the or enroll in this program because they want to build a resume. So let's talk about the first point, which is conducting research on psychology and law-related topics. So this can be kind of broad, but this is generally what the main labs focus on, which is how juries make decisions, how People remember information when you're making eyewitness decisions, eyewitness identifications. There is some false confession work, looking at how, why some people might falsely confess. And then in general, looking at autobiographical memory. So again, a memory component. And then when you're specifically interested in how memory is relevant to the legal system. So the reason why it's a research-based program is because the thesis project is something that you're working on during your second year. And at the end of that second year, you have to defend your thesis, and then the committee of faculty members decide whether you have defended your thesis successfully. And that is essentially what gives you the permission or gives you the degree of a master's. So this is different than when you earn your BA degree, which is if you complete the units, if you take the classes, you'll be awarded the degree at the end of your undergrad experience. But in a master's program, you can take all of your classes, but that doesn't mean that you're going to complete your degree. So having that thesis project, defending that thesis project, and having the committee of faculty review it and decide that this is a credible and reliable research project that's well conducted to the best of your ability. That is the ultimate not hurdle, but like the ultimate challenge that you have to overcome before you are awarded or you earn your master's degree. So you are going to take some psychology related courses, primarily courses that you'll take alongside the general or the MA psychology program. So these courses teach you how to be a better researcher. So you're going to take a course in advanced experimental methods or research methods. This is the course that I teach in the fall, the first semester for incoming students. You'll take 1 or 2 statistics courses to help you be able to interpret and analyze your data for your thesis. And then you'll take a couple of seminars depending on your interest and expertise and availability. So you might take a seminar in social psychology or multicultural psychology. So even if you've taken these classes in undergrad, in a grad class, which I'll talk about in a bit, it's going to be a very different structure, but you're going to have a much deeper understanding of the topic as opposed to in your undergrad classes. You also take a couple of classes that are specific to the psych law program. So you might take, for example, courtroom and legal issues in the criminalistic school. So these are alongside folks who are studying to be forensic scientists. So they are the folks that are doing like the CSI forensic investigation. So you get to take a class with them. And then you take some psychology and law, like human memory, undergraduate level courses. So these are courses that are taken alongside undergrads in the psychology department. So something that might be helpful to you depending on any type of program that you end up pursuing. In grad school, you're usually going to take seminars, which are very different than undergrad courses. So undergrad courses are pretty large, depending on the topic and especially depending on the institution. But in your undergrad, you're usually in a large group or a large room with a lot of students, and you may not have that much interaction with the professor. But in grad school, those classes are much smaller. So typically in these courses, depending on the size, you might even have the room arranged in a circle so that you can discuss the content. And some of these courses are not lecture-based, where the professor would stand up at the front of the classroom and have a couple of slides and basically present the content to you. It's a lot more of what did you think about the article? Let's talk about some big issues in the field. Let's talk about the issues in that you're considering or anything like that, or based on your research, what are your thoughts? So really more engaging, very, very active, and you have a lot of opportunity to be able to get to know the instructor and share your thoughts and ideas with the class. I'm just seeing a question here. How many times can you defend your thesis before receiving your master's degree if it doesn't work out the first time? So this is a good question, something to keep in mind, that when you are defending your thesis, you're working alongside your faculty mentor, and your faculty mentor gives you advice on whether they think you're ready to defend it. So the goal, across all faculty mentors is that we want to see you succeed. So we want to set you up for success when you do defend. So if you are at a point where you're writing your manuscript, that document that you're putting together is not in great shape, even if you're coming up on the end of the semester that you're supposed to defend in a timely fashion, that faculty mentor is responsible for letting you know, hey, you're not ready. I need to see these things before I think you're ready. So these things are set in place to kind of avoid a defense that is unsuccessful and then you have to do it again. It does happen once in a blue moon, it does happen. But typically, if you follow these check marks, when you do defend, they think that you're ready to defend. They think that you've kind of done your homework and your paper is in pretty good shape. And they think that you are going to be successful. But I think you can defend as many times as you need to. There isn't a limit to how many times you have to defend, but it does take a lot of effort because you have to schedule everyone to be present at a certain time, and faculty are very busy and they don't want to keep coming back to a presentation if you're not ready. So they kind of have these checks and balances there to hope that your defense is going to be successful. Okay, so something to hopefully look forward to if you're interested in grad school. I think it's very different, and I think it's way more enjoyable. Yeah, it's a little bit more stressful because you are encouraged to participate and you're, talking about more complex topics, but these are topics that you're interested in, right? You're in grad school for a reason. And especially if you're interested in psychology and law or psychology as a whole, being able to talk about these research ideas is usually something that is interesting and engaging, and you want to have that lively discussion with other folks. So it's a very different setting versus you reading a textbook and then having just to regurgitate the information in the text. Okay, so the year-long practicum is pretty wide and flexible depending on your interest. So it's not a calendar year, but it's an academic year. So for fall and spring semester of your second year, you have taken most of your classes already. So you take a pretty heavy course load in the first year because your second year is primarily focused on your thesis writing and your practicum. So instead of you taking classes your second year, you're spending a lot of your time putting together your thesis, doing research, and then participating in this practicum or volunteer or internship position. It can be about 8 to 10 hours a week. So some folks like to schedule it either 2 days a week or maybe one long day, depending on the site and depending on the preference of your site. Some of these positions in the past have been at jury consulting firms, where you help out depending on what they need at the time, right? So it might be coding qualitative surveys from their mock trials. It might be doing research on the topic. So if they have a certain case that involves some things, so you might go into the literature and do a literature review for them to give them an idea of what research has found, maybe analyzing some data, things like that. The dependency court, I actually don't know what these folks were doing. I think they were working with people that were like families and children that were coming into the court. But yeah,
I can
actually
speak on
don't know
that
exactly what you're
briefly
doing,
if
but
you'd like.
please.
Okay. I think that's where I did my practicum, and it's actually where I'm currently employed. It's the Juvenile Dependency Court, and there are two aspects. There's the Children's Law Center, and then there's the Los Angeles Dependency Lawyers. That's where I'm at, and it's been a really
Okay.
interesting experience. We do have a system that, records our notes, and we interact with parents. So I think it's really good for someone who maybe wanting to go to the clinical forensic. So if you're looking in clinical psychology or clinical forensic, you do get that one-on-one with the parents. You get a little bit of practice and, note-taking, documenting, such as that. But if you're also interested in psych and law, we work alongside attorneys and we do collect evidence and help in whatever motions they're preparing. We support them in that capacity. So it really is
No, that's cool.
a good place to get that psych and law experience. Yeah, and I don't want to take over. So I think if students want to know more, reach out to me. I'm not going to be the president next year, but I am working on my thesis, so I'll be around.
Nice. Thank you for sharing that. That's really awesome. That sounds really cool. Yeah, so it can vary. It can vary a lot depending on your placement, which is really cool. And currently trying to find new placements and new connections in the community to just broaden the approach and perspective of the possibilities. So pretty unique to our program and a really cool opportunity. So the reason why I talk about how this program is really designed for students who are applying to PhD programs is typically because it serves as a really nice stepping stone for folks that want to get more research experience, or if you're potentially exploring what a career in research would look like. You get an idea of what conducting your independent project can look like and seeing a project from beginning to end, if you're interested in going to any different type of research positions. You do have the freedom and the option to enter the job market after a MS degree. Again, to try to pursue some of these options that I talked about before. I am transparent with students, and I am honest in the reality in that a lot of these positions are being pursued by people with PhDs. So you are still competing against PhDs, because PhDs in general, the pathway has changed a little bit, in that a lot of folks are now going into applied positions, not just academic or professor positions. So now they're going into jury consulting, they're going into government positions. So depending on the type of job that you're applying for, you just want to make sure that you are competitive at that level and that you have decided that, this is the best path for you. I have a question. Do you have any important tips for a personal statement? I definitely do. I hope I can get to some of that at the end. I do have some tips that I like to share at the end of this presentation. So thank you for that. Also, again, being transparent and being clear about what our program does and what our program does not do. So I want to make sure that students know that this is not a licensing track master's program. So at the end of your degree, you will not be eligible to take a licensing exam. So those types of programs are different, and you want to make sure that if your goal is to practice, to get a license, to have clients, to be a therapist, you are applying to licensing programs. This is not a licensing track master's. Some folks think that you can transfer courses into a PhD program because you're taking grad level classes, and that typically is pretty rare. It's pretty rare. I haven't seen that successfully done, and that when you start your PhD, even though you have a master's and even though some folks come in with a BA, you are more qualified, but that does not mean that you're going to cut out some classes from the PhD. So when I was in my PhD program, excuse me, about half of the folks had a master's and half of the folks didn't. And we took the same classes, and I think our approach to the PhD was different, and I'm happy that I was able to get my master's. I think it helped me grow as a student, and it made me more, I was still, you know, imposter syndrome and all of that stuff, but it did make me more confident than if I would have gone straight from my undergrad. And then finally, we don't train people to be criminal profilers or crime scene investigators. So again, that forensic label can sometimes prompt different ideas of what we are doing. And that's why I sometimes shy away from using forensic to folks that are not familiar with it, because they think that I'm out there collecting saliva, and I'm not. Okay, so also, excuse me. All right, sorry. Allergies this morning. All right, so the difference between the general master's or the MA program in the department and the MS program in forensic psych, because we do have two master's programs within the department to help you clarify and differentiate between the two. The similarities is that they're both research-based programs with a thesis. You will take courses in both, with the MS program being the additional courses that are in psych law, and then the research focus is going to be different, but I think the biggest difference is that the MS is more applied, and that's what makes it an MS, is that it's more applied, it's more hands-on, because you are having that 1-year practicum opportunity in your second year. So the difference as well comes in how many students are taken each year. So the MA program is broadly across the Department of Psychology, which means that if your focus is cultural psychology, developmental psychology, physiological, you know, anything that's broader than forensic psych is typically captured by the other faculty labs on campus. So they'll take more students because it's across all of these different labs. So they'll typically take, you know, 10 to 15 depending on the year. And then for the MS program, these are basically 3 research labs. So it doesn't mean that you can't collaborate with other folks, but these are the primary forensic psych research labs in the department. So because these are much smaller possibilities, we do take a much smaller cohort, 5 to 6 students a year, but that can vary depending on, you know, how many faculty are taking a student that year, and then you'll typically interact a lot with a lot of the MA students if you're in the psych program, in the forensic psych program. Okay, so just being mindful of the time, I want to go over a couple of these different requirements and then some tips that I have at the end. I see a question. I was placed in Dr. Reggio's lab since my thesis is looking at perceptions and judgments of guilt. Wish we would have the legal attitudes lab when I started. Oh, thank you. Yeah, so I'm really new. I'm really new to the field, so I'm happy that you did find a home, but I'm happy that, you know, hopefully it can get more students at home this upcoming year. Okay, so if you're applying to the MS program, you're going to apply in February for a fall start date of that year. Okay, so if you are graduating, say for example, in spring or whenever you're graduating that semester, you have to backtrack to make sure that you have applied to the master's program if you're interested in applying, or you're interested in not having a gap between your undergrad and your master's. There's 3 letters of recommendations to go along with your application. We recommend that you have faculty members write you letters because they have seen you in the classroom and they can speak to your abilities as a student and potential as a graduate student. your transcripts. A GPA of 3.0 is minimum. So if you have a GPA that's lower than 3.0, it's very likely that your application will not be considered. I do want to highlight that even though the minimum is 3.0, the applications that are looked at first or that rise to the top are high GPAs. And I can talk a little bit about the students that we did invite to join us. So our program is pretty competitive. This last year alone, we received 117 applications for the MS program that met the minimum. We took 4 students, so about 3.5% success rate, and an average of the GPA of the incoming students was 3.85. So in the goal of full transparency and understanding of like, it is possible, but you want to be aware of the reality of what is going to make your application rise to the top, right? And it may be GPA, but even some folks that have a very high GPA, but don't have the things that I'll talk about in a bit, that's not going to carry them all the way, but it is an application packet, and GPA is one of the components that we look at. And then your statement of purpose, which is a combination of who you are, what you've done, why you want to come here, and where you want to go after Cal State LA. Pretty short, 500 words, but that is a really big piece, and definitely something that I spend a lot of time reviewing, not only to see your writing ability, but also to see what your experiences are and what your interests are. Okay, so staying on track with the statement of purpose. So something that I look for, and typically what I see in the patterns between folks who are successful and not successful, is being able to communicate your research interests clearly and specifically. Because this is a research-based program, I'm specifically looking at your research knowledge and your research experience. So if you are applying to the master's, but you don't necessarily convince me that you have a deeper understanding of the topic, that's going to give me pause before I give you a research project, right? Because at the grad level, you are transitioning from, an undergrad student that is consuming the knowledge into something that you're taking more of a leadership role on, right? So I want to trust that you understand how research works and that you have clear ideas of what you want to do. So not to say that these statements are, a red flag or something that I'm not going to consider or something that I don't want to see. But if this is the depth of the understanding that I see in your statement, for example, I want to study the criminal mind, or I want to improve mental health in the legal system. That's great. These things are great and very interesting, but it's very different when you're comparing it to a statement that can talk about their interest in how race impacts jury decisions. Because this shows me how you understand what specific component is impacting what, rather than a broad approach to think like, I think this topic is cool. You know what I mean? And if you are trying to sell the fact that you have the skills and abilities, you have to consider the fact that you have conducted a lot of courses, or you have completed a lot of courses. If you have research experience, that means that you've worked on something, and you want to show that. You want to communicate that you have the skills and abilities to be able to talk about research articles competently as a graduate student. All right. So one of the last things I'll talk about is interviewing for the MS program. So if you apply to the program, a faculty member that is interested in working with you may invite you for an interview, right? Depending on their previous experience with you, depending on, you know, they might do a group interview. I've heard of that in the past, but I think we might be transitioning into a more individual interview focus, and that's what I did when I was interviewing folks for this upcoming cycle. So this is something, you know, these are some tips that I would encourage you to take with you anytime that you interview for an academic or research position. The first is by reading previous research. You want to read what recent articles the professor or faculty member has published, so that you have an understanding of what they do, right? And that you show that that you've done your homework and that you want to work with them. There's a reason why you have decided to interview for that position. So showing that you have done your homework by looking up the lab website online or reading their previous research articles, so that you can ask more in-depth questions and not ask questions that may be available on the website, right? You don't want to show up to an interview and ask, you know, what do you do, right? Or yeah, you know, like, tell me about the master's program at Cal State LA or something like that, or ask me questions that show that you haven't really dug into our program or that specific faculty. Prepare questions, right? So you want to have questions about the current, you know, the reason why you're asking questions is because we want to see how invested or how much you really want to join this specific program. You want to show that you really are interested in learning about what it would be like to be a student in their lab. Tell me about your current projects, right? If there's something that is currently on the website that is about the current projects, maybe dive a little deeper into those projects. How do you describe your mentoring style, right? If I want to be your grad student, or if I'm hoping that I'm your grad student, I also want you to think about what type of relationship you'll have with the person. How often do you meet with students, right? Just again, insight into what life is going to be like as a grad student shows us that you really want to engage in this interaction, and shows that you are comfortable asking questions, because that's also part of the process, right? Is that sometimes you know, we can lead you down a path in research, and you're gonna get to a point where you're like, oh, I don't know what to do after this, right? And I want you to be comfortable asking me, hey, what do I do next? Like, what do you think about this? What do you think about this, right? Because there is that back and forth relationship. And then finally, be professional and enthusiastic. Very, very, very critical piece that I think I see the most is it is an interview, right? So you want to dress for the occasion. You want to communicate, hey, I take this seriously and I really value this opportunity, and being excited, right? Being excited, you know, you don't want to show up to an interview and say, well, you know, you're the only place that invited me for an interview, so let's just do this, right? And hopefully it works. It's like, no, you still want to put your best foot forward and try to convince the person to invite you to join the program. It is an opportunity for you to show, like, hey, I'm good on paper, but I'm also good in person, and like I can interact with you, I can engage with you, and I can communicate and talk about research in a very enthusiastic way. And I want to continue to do this. You're a salesperson, right? At the end of the day, it's like you're trying to convince people to invest in you. And then a tip that I always like to share with students is short interviews are not great interviews, which means if you don't have a lot to contribute, the interviewer is not responsible for extending the interview. The interviewer is not responsible for dragging things out of you or dragging your personality out of you. You want to put your personality, your interest, your enthusiasm out there. because if you aren't excited about it, if you don't have anything to give me, there's a couple of other people that are waiting in line that are ready to give me that. And that's the reality of it, right? When you're trying to stand out in the best possible way. And that's by having an interview in which you're engaging, in which it's interesting, in which you leave the conversation thinking, I want to talk to this person again, right? Okay. And then some tips on interview practice. So I started looking into different resources that we have at Cal State LA. There is a link to something called the Big Interview. So you can visit the Career Center, and they have a lot of great resources that I wish I had when I was at this stage. But they have a list of questions with someone that you can practice with. This setup asks you questions. You can record your response, and they have an AI feedback tool, which is, I haven't tried it yet, right? But what I read is that the AI feedback tool gives you feedback on like things like filler words, how much you're pausing, maybe like your range when you're speaking, your posture, things like that. So this is really cool, and hopefully you all find it beneficial. You can even pick like an easy interview versus a hard interview. You can have them randomize different questions so that you can experience what it's like kind of waiting there and seeing what is the next thing that they're going to ask you. So I think that's a really cool resource. And then the last thing that I'll end with is I'm sharing this new venture that I'm hoping will be beneficial for students. I like to share a lot of resources and information, and sometimes I wish that it lives somewhere where I can direct students to, kind of keep up with me. And as I learn about these different resources, I can share that with you. So if you are interested in getting more information, you can follow South Central Meets Academia. And I think it's going to be really cool that we currently have some resources there that are really helpful, that Jillian has helped me put together a list of different resources that students can browse through. So it's definitely something that's growing. So stay tuned for more updates, but I hope you find it useful. I know I'm being mindful of time, so I'll end here, and then I'm happy to stay on to answer more questions and chat about anything that you might have in the chat, or unmute yourself. But thank you so much. It was really great presenting again. PsyChi is a great resource for students, and I'm happy to chat with folks. Have a question. Are you open to adding more students in your lab? So I'm currently not taking any more applicants. I am currently interviewing folks and hopefully making decisions by next week. And I think I've interviewed enough folks by now. Yeah, so I think I'm hoping that I have a full team already. But you never know, stay tuned, things change. But I will definitely put a call out once I do want to source new applications. I had a question here during a private question asking about what I would suggest for students who have lower than a 3.0, but want to pursue a master's. So thank you for asking these questions. I think it's very valid to think about what your options are. And like, again, I want to be transparent with you so that you know what might be helpful moving forward. The reason why I share the high GPA is the reality of it, but I encourage you to say that it's not possible. So I have interviewed folks or have looked at folks that may not be on the higher end because I saw potential in them, because I had a different interaction with them. And I would consider the possibility of kind of vouching for the student and saying like, hey, you know what, the GPA is not great, but I have evidence that they can still be great. So you have to find other ways to sell yourself and have other ways for your application to rise to the top, whether it's, joining a research lab, excelling in that position, right? Because whatever position, whatever experience that you have, it's one thing to kind of show up and get the credit at the end of the day. But if you are going above and beyond, that's something that can really shine in your letters. That's something that can really shine in your statements. So finding ways to make yourself stand out aside from what may be not so strong points in your application. Both the MA and the MS for forensic psych both do not lead to licensure, correct? Yes. So both of our programs are not license-based. And these are the MA in general psychology and the MS in forensic psychology. So both are research-based programs designed for folks that want to go into a research position or want to go into a PhD. Post-bachelor's, can we continue to do research with university? Yes. Yeah. So I'm actually taking someone who completed their bachelor's before, but volunteered at research labs at different institutions to get more research experience. So sometimes it might be a little bit harder because you aren't affiliated with someone at that point, but it is possible. It is possible. So, any way that you can keep an eye out, that you can network, that you can ask around, that would be really helpful. Cool. And Jillian Almanza is a great resource. She's the one that's helping me with the South Central Meets Academia Instagram. And she is so generous with her time that she can definitely, help out and help you talk through some things. And it's really taking advantage of the folks that are willing to spend time and effort, outside of their time, right? Because everybody's busy. Everybody's busy. And especially when grad students are especially busy. She's wrapping up her thesis in a couple of weeks. She could easily say, like, I don't have time to help you out. But she's willing to set time aside because she really is devoted to helping students figure out the complicated world of graduate school. Cool. Yeah, PsychHi is great. Can I speak to one of the PsychHi leaders after about becoming a member? Cool. It looks like we got one.
Thank you so much, Dr. Olaguez. It's a wonderful presentation. I really appreciate you taking that time and adding those career center resources. We do have a campus liaison, but there's so much out there that the more eyes and the more collaboration we have, the more information we get out there.
Yeah, and it's always something, that it's always changing and it's always new, and that's why it's always helpful to just see what's around. And as you're a student, as you're figuring stuff out, talk to people, ask people, Google stuff. Like, don't be afraid to mindlessly Google things until you find something that's helpful, because you don't know. And that was something that I wanted to share with you. It's like, okay, I think people kind of struggle with this. Like, what are some things that we have? And I'm glad, I hope it works.
Yes, thank you so much. And I did hear what you said, but I'm still going to send an email just in case, you end up having an empty spot for the lab. And
yeah. But you're a grad student, right? You mentioned you're a grad student.
Yes, I'm a grad student. Yeah. But I'm on my way out, but I'm still looking because my job is more, like you said, it's more practical. It's in the field. I'm still looking for ways to stay connected with the research. Yeah.
Nice. Yeah. Stay in touch. Stay in touch with folks in the program. I am also trying to use even the Instagram page to just kind of keep in contact with folks, because sometimes I want to share information or I want to touch base with folks, and it's hard to keep track of everyone's email or have you sign up for a listserv or something like that.
Well, we also have that in the works right now. We're trying to have a PsychHi alumni page, so hopefully the MA student who's here, if you are a member, you can join that page. And with your permission, if you allow us to, we could share this with other SciChi members if you're willing to share that time.
Oh, yeah, I'm happy to. I think it's more important for me to get the word out, and hopefully some folks find it helpful.
Okay. Well, thank you again so much. And I will make sure our SciChi page follows yours and be able to collaborate
Nice.
and support
Thank you.
and spread all that. Camilla, I'll leave it up to you so you can close it out. And if you'd like to stick around and chat with the member or the person who would like to become a member, I'll exit out now.
Yeah, of course. Thank you so much. And thank you, Dr. Olaguez. I will be staying just a little bit over just in case anybody wanted to stay around and ask any questions. But other than that, thank you all for being here. This was an amazing presentation. Thank you so much to Dr. O. And yeah, everyone have a wonderful day, and I'll stay back for the people that want to ask questions.
Awesome. Thank you, folks.
Thank you. So the recording of all of the meetings is going to be on Teams. You can download the app, or I believe you can also go through your My Cal State LA portal if you log in. And there's a code that we provided on the PowerPoints, which let me go back if you wanted to take a screenshot of it. Let me just share my screen real quick. Yeah, of course. Okay. Are you able to see the screen? Okay. So I can't really see the chat right now because I'm sharing the screen, but it's going to be that code where it says add us on Microsoft Teams. And yeah, that way you'll be able to go under files, and it's going to be meeting Zoom recordings, I believe, or something like that, a folder with a similar name, and everything is going to be in there.
Hi, so I was a member that had a question about joining.
Okay, hi.
So I actually had been coming to the meetings since like last semester, and I'm already on the Microsoft Teams and stuff. And I applied back in October, actually, like on the whole SciSci website. And I actually got a response back at the beginning of this school year, but it told me to it said that you had been invited to apply. So I was like, okay, I'll just do it again. And when I went through the whole online process of reapplying, because I thought maybe that was just going to be like the final step, it actually sent me a message saying that they already had an application with my name on it, and it told me to contact my chapter's leaders about it. So I just wanted to know where I should go from there.
Let me put my email in the chat. So I would actually be able to help you with that.
Okay.
I'll look into if your application has been processed or like what's going on with it.
Right.
This is my email. Did you already do the payment or no?
No, I haven't got to the payment step yet.
Okay. Okay, so that's going to be my email. And my name is Kimia.
Got it.
There you go.
Okay.
Just reach out to me. I'll look into it just to see what's going on with that. Yeah, some of the accounts, sometimes they don't get the automated email that they've been accepted. So I know a lot of people have been having those issues like throughout the year.
Right. Okay. Thank you so
yeah.
much. I'll email you my name and stuff.
Okay, of course. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.